Hello and good morning. Thank you for joining us. This is part of our virtual tech conference. Uh, Today we have David Grant, our software solutions manager, who will be talking to us about the importance of digital signatures featuring Adobe Sign. So looking forward to a great presentation from Dave. If you can put your questions in the chat feature that you'll see on the right there. Make sure you mark your questions, mark as a question, so you'll see a red queue come up when you put your question in. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Mr. Grant.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'll just get my screen up in front of me. Hopefully everybody can see my intro slides. Thank you very much. As Jeremy said, my name is David Grant. I'm the Software Solutions Manager here at Academia. Pleased to see a few familiar names in the lobby today. So I know we spoke to a couple of individuals about digital signatures recently. So it's a bit of a hot topic, and we thought we'd try and do an event to try and explain a bit more around Adobe solution. So in regards to today, I'm going to take probably around 30 minutes. We'll do a brief introduction on who Academia are. We'll have a definition of what Sign is, but kind of in a nutshell. We'll then look at some of the benefits of the solution, and I've put together some specific benefits I feel that are applicable for HE and for education. We'll then look at the fun stuff in my world, the licensing options, before we look at how they support, which is really crucial, I think. I've done a comparison with DocuSign as we're getting so many requests for both, which I thought might help. And then we'll have a quick summary and we'll have time for questions, although if you have queries throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat pod. So introduction wise, who are Academia? Hopefully most of you know us already, but we're about to have our birthday. We're going to be 18 years old next month. And we're a UK privately owned reseller with around 100 staff employed. With, you know, the owners are very much involved in day-to-day, keeping me on my toes. But as our name suggests, we're predominantly focused on the academic and education sector. We have teams dedicated to schools, dedicated to colleges and for universities. Universities in particular we play very well in. We probably actively serve 95% of the sector with a huge range of products and services, and Adobe is by no means exempt from that. So we are Adobe's largest educational reseller. I was trying to find out since when, but I think this could be as potentially as long as 10 years running now. So we've got a real strong foothold, really good in-house knowledge throughout all the sales guys, and I help support that centrally as well. And we're one of only 9 platinum partners for Adobe in the UK, which is the highest accreditation you can achieve with them. And this year they rolled out a new program as they look to really have focus on education, and they've started to understand there are differences with education and differences with education in the UK than the US as well, which is arguably a win. So we're only one of 4 of these new elite education partners. So we are as top tier as we can get with Adobe. So let's get into it. What is Adobe Sign? This is a slide I've stolen from Adobe, and there are a couple today, so apologies if I haven't un-Americanized them, if there are Z's where there are S's. But it gives you a good definition, but I think the bold statement underneath sort of captures it quite well, in that it's a cloud-based service to enable legal e-signatures, and it's part of Document Clouds. And one point I just want to make at this stage is this is, you know, we hear a lot around digital transformation in all sorts of establishments, but certainly education. And this is, you know, a really simple example of a digital transformation of taking manual paper-based processes, automating them and getting all the benefits that come along with it. And it's arguably a quick win. Most of the time, digital transformation are huge integration projects trying to bring in old systems and new. This is a really good way of being able to get some quick benefits, improve by, you know, I won't steal my own thunder, we'll touch on some of the benefits in a moment, but how to have a better working practice, save money, so on and so forth. So what are the benefits of using Sign and for who? And before I jump into some specific stuff for the education sector, I'm going to give you a mini story on my transformation towards digital signatures. I sign a lot of SLRA contracts, so any of you that are dare I say, fortunate enough to be in the software procurement side that maybe work with SLRA, the software license reseller agreement frameworks, we're very prevalent on those, and we sit as rank 1 on a couple of lots. So I sign lots of these call-off contracts, which are standard standard are 45 pages. So my old process was really manual and time consuming. And when you look at these as sort of, individuals, it's really obvious to see some of the negatives. So I'm just going to touch on my old process. We'll go over some of the negatives just to really highlight again how a digital signature can really help. So I would print these SLRA contracts. They're at least 45 pages long, and that's assuming nobody's added annexes. They can easily be over 100 pages. I'd print it. I'd probably leave it at the printer because I wouldn't want to just stand there whilst 100 pages are being printed, save myself some time. I then would wander over to the printer. I would sign the document. I would scan it back into the printer, into the scanner, which would then send me an email. I threw away all of the pages that I'd printed, and it's a bit embarrassing because I'm going back a few years here, and we had a terrible scanner. I think I was the only one that used it, and it had a limitation of around 10 pages. So instead of me getting one email back from the scanner, I would have 5 emails with 5 PDF attachments that I then had to stitch together. But lo and behold, once I'm finished, I am now good to send my document. So the negatives of this process, there's some obvious ones, but there's a couple that might be less obvious. And again, the implications of these really depend on the processes that are involved. So first and foremost, and a huge driving force for me was a sustainability perspective. I did some quick maths and thought if I'm doing a couple of these contracts a week, I'm probably going to do them 50 weeks a year. I'm probably wasting about 5,000 sheets of paper myself, let alone the related materials, waste and transport that goes along with the manufacturing and delivery of paper as well. And that for me was a real kick for me to say, how can I use some of the software I have, some of this free software Adobe have given us to use? I should probably start maximizing it. In addition, I left it at the printer, and whilst the SLRA isn't sensitive, I think the biggest danger is potentially falling asleep if you were to read through the whole thing. But if you're in finance, if you're in HR or research potentially, you might have sensitive data. You don't want to be leaving that at a printer. Obviously, a huge amount of time lost. I don't expect many people to have the scanner issue that I had, but still, when you think about that, the entire process, and we take out the stitching piece, the concept of printing, wandering over, signing, scanning, walking back, then trying to get the document back to the customer in a meaningful manner takes a significant amount longer than it does just to merely sign whilst in the document and send there and then. So it's a lost time, and obviously time would mean efficiency, which has cost and saving implications for institutions as well. A really applicable one here, and one that that often gets overlooked, but is it even evidence I signed it? If I'd left it at the printer and somebody had got there before I got distracted on a call, for example, they could have just scanned it in and copied it one for themselves. They could have maybe signed it and sent it off to somebody, and they probably would have accepted it. The only query will be maybe an email address it was received from. So how auditable is this? How much evidence is there that it's my signature? My signature is rarely consistent as well, I must say. I don't know why, but it seems to evolve on a signature by signature basis. So a really valid point, and all of these are things that are mitigated when you move to digital signature solutions. And just to highlight as well, my example is as simple as it gets. This is what I would probably call an A to B type transaction. There are 2 stakeholders involved, someone sending a contract, someone signing a contract. There's no complicated workflow, there's no additional provers, no second signatory. And when you start looking at those more complex processes and workflows, all of the benefits just expand and exaggerate significantly. But fundamentally, my process was inefficient and insecure. Again, I think it's an American slide, so there's some dollar figures in there, but it's an applicable slide. So when we look at some of the solution benefits of Adobe, again, there's some obvious ones and maybe some that are less so. The first one, manual paper-based processes are inefficient and time-consuming. Exactly as per my example, it was incredibly time-consuming, it was inefficient, it was frustrating as well at times. So Adobe have spent quite a lot of money with Forrester to do some research on the potential benefits, and they've suggested that workers could be 30% more productive by automating signing and approvals. Again, that would be specific, I would say, to heavy users, people that are involved in it all the time. If I was doing 5 contracts a day, then I probably would have been able to save 30% of time, or just buy a new scanner, who knows. And then people whose technologies don't translate into improved business results. And again, earlier I talked about digital transformation, how painful some of them processes are. It could take years to come out of the back of a digital transformation of certain projects, and to actually measure a return can be really hard. change with Adobe Sign is great because actually it's really easy to measure to see some of the benefits, and it genuinely impacts a user experience. If you think from a student or new hires perspective, where you could sign a contract on your mobile on the fly as opposed to waiting for some physical documentation or waiting for somebody to sign it somewhere else, really good for the user experience. Quite obviously, it's quicker to sign. Quicker to sign means more efficiency, potentially time saved will result in money saved or allow you to apply resource to get on with other tasks. Cost savings, so not just cost savings by saving time, but again, that Forrester report showed that companies had saved $11 per signing transaction, which is around probably £6-7 in today's money. So quite significant. And when you start scaling that up based on the number of transactions you're doing, it's a solution that can actually really deliver a return on investment for institutions as well. Revenue and CRM, so very salesy, but short in the sales cycle. But from an education perspective, you think we have thousands of new students enrolling every year in a very short time frame. Being able to streamline and improve the student enrollment process, for example, could really help improve revenue and CRM. It could potentially result in more students. I just want to show a few examples or case studies that there are of this. They haven't got any in the UK that I could find just yet. There's a few applicable from our friends over in the States. So Pace University, they're a New York establishment. They're probably fairly similarly sized to UK universities. They'd probably be a small to medium uni over here. And they had a few processes which required multiple signatures. And when you read it, you've got the staff saying, I literally had stacks of paper, and worse still, I was taking some of these pieces of paper, scanning them and printing them another 10 times because I need to send them off for 10 people to sign, creating more and more paper. It was really hard to manage, but ignoring all the other benefits just for the moment, they were saving 100,000 sheets of paper a year by streamlining that process. San Diego State University, they're quite a big establishment. They've got over 12,000 staff. But a constant challenge for HR and education is there's a lot of people coming, going and moving. So you have guest lecturers, we have researchers, we have associates, as well as just staff who may be joining, leaving, and everything that happens in between. So San Diego State University's onboarding process for new staff took about 30 minutes, which was a manual paper-based process. And by switching to Sign, they've managed to get it down to 10 minutes. So again, it probably doesn't seem that significant when you look at a 20-minute saving, but again, when you start scaling that up based on the quantity, it becomes significant. And likewise, when you look at more complex workflows that might have taken 2 hours before as opposed to 30 minutes, then that saving again gets magnified, and it does really scale up. An Iowa State Foundation who now have saved 13 days in funding approval. So that really allows them, they're getting money in, they're allowing them to get on with business a lot faster. Use cases are quite good to be wary of, because again, I think when we talk about digital signatures, we very much think sign a contract, and absolutely we would sign contracts with digital signatures, but there's far more to it as well, and I think it's good to understand these when we start understanding the wider benefits of digital signature technologies. So sign, yep, contracts, NDAs, etc. We might just need to fill out a form. You might have student enrollment potentially, or new staff hires, where you may just want somebody to complete a form that can automate what happens with that form once they've completed it. It may then get sent off for somebody else for signature potentially. We may just need to approve something, something I'm sure a few of you could probably relate to, but when you really need to get something and all the pressure's on to order something, and that senior director's not around to approve an order, again, getting their attention is probably the main thing, but this can really help automate that process. It can identify alternative contacts potentially that can approve that. So it's heavily utilized just for approving when a signature may not be required. Similarly, accepting, I think this is a really applicable one for education. And again, I think about student enrollment in particular, the terms and conditions students need to sign based on courses, maybe accommodation, maybe unis, T's and C's. And again, trying to automate that process where it's chasing students automatically for you, and you can report and flag and manage it all centrally. That can be really beneficial. And then when we look at certified recipient, I think this is probably more applicable for more regulated elements of an institution. So maybe finance, legal, procurement, research. And this is the ability to show an audit trail and to show everything that's happened with a document, from who created it, who's edited the document, who signed it, who's interacted. And it stands up in court, that as well. So let's look at some specifics. There's some specific use cases for education. And what I'm going to do with everybody after this, there's 2 PDFs Adobe have made I think are really good. Again, they're a bit Americanized, but the concept's the same. And what they've done is a document around Adobe Sign for higher education and one for K-12, which is what they would call schools. So I think anybody that's a college or university customer would benefit from the HE one, and any schools would benefit from the K-12 one. So we'll check domains and we'll share out the applicable PDFs with you afterwards. And one of the things they talk about in that is common areas that Sign would be utilised in education. So inside this bubble in the middle, there are the 3 main areas Adobe see as probably being heavy users. Again, earlier I talked about my example, kind of an A to B transaction. These guys are likely to have more complex workflows. They may need it to integrate with other applications. So student and enrollment, again, potentially 7,000 students joining in a very short period of time. Anything to automate and better that process, there's probably lots of opportunities. And again, at the application process. HR and staff management, I briefly touched on that when we were looking at the San Diego State case study. And again, onboarding staff, offboarding staff, and everything in the middle, there are often lots of paperwork, approvals, contracts, and managing those processes properly, building templates, sharing them amongst the team can really make you a more efficient department. And similarly, IT and facilities management, again, they may need to streamline facilities management, optimize IT service approvals. Again, lots of approvals, lots of documents, lots of contracts. So being able to automate those is really key. And whilst Adobe have highlighted those 3, I think the ones I've drawn around the side, so you've got finance, legal, research, procurement, and marketing. I think particularly when I think finance, legal, research, procurement, they're all quite paper heavy. They're going to have lots of contracts, lots of other stakeholders they have to work with, internal and external. Approvals are going to be key for all of them. So these guys could all be quite heavy users potentially of this. And I know we've had requirements for legal, we've had requirements for research, for all of these as well. And even departments like marketing, where they might want to create a form to put online to help capture content from students as well. So there's lots and lots of use cases, and really we're looking at anybody that has paper-based manual processes, but at the same time we can be creative and we can innovate with this to see how it can help enhance other solutions and other processes within the wider organization. So the fun stuff, how is it licensed? So I think we'll start by looking at the columns first, where you've got 4 columns showing 4 different versions of the product. Individual and small business are both only available via adobe.com. The business and the enterprise versions are what we would supply, what's available through the channel. So just going through them, feature-wise, you can see at the bottom here, this is everything you get with an individual. All of this is included in small business, plus all these additional features. All of these are included in the business edition, plus some extra features. And all of this is included in enterprise, plus a few differentials here. Why would a customer pick business or enterprise edition? For me, actually, it's just these main things here. It's integrations, APIs, and workflows. So workflow designer and workflow template is what allows you to create an automated workflow and an automated process. So you could drag and drop people's names in, what their role is. Are they a signer? Are they an approver? Who has to sign before the next person approves? How often do we want to leave spaces before we chase them on these again? And you can build this entire process. It can be quite complex. And you can hit go and it just follows through. And you can have templates that are available just to save time if you're doing lots of similar type workflows, but there might be slight nuances. So really, really important for anybody that has complex workflows. Enterprise is probably the way forwards, but likewise, and just as important, integrations and APIs. So you can see all the way back from the basic version, Office 365 integration is included, but that's the only one. If you need maybe Salesforce, a CRM integration, there are 70 off-the-shelf integrations with Adobe, and then there's loads of APIs where you can make your own if you like. So if you need that functionality, if it's HR, finance, needing to integrate with tools, so on and so forth, the enterprise solution is the one you want. Just to briefly touch on features, actually, while we're here, the two the business, I've highlighted knowledge-based authentication in red because it's not available in the UK yet. And being quite frank, I can't see phone authentication being utilised much. Whilst it is included, there is a limit on how many you get, and then they start charging you. But more importantly, as standard, two-factor sign authentication is included in all of these additions that we would supply. And that simply means when you send, let's say I send the contract through for someone to sign, but it's a really sensitive one, I really want to know it's them, I might say, actually, I want you to enter a password before you open a document, or I may need you to log in with your Adobe ID because I know you've got one of those as well, so on and so forth. So there's lots of different ways we can authenticate to ensure we have more security. Now, if we start looking across the rows, we'll start with maximum seat. So again, only focusing really on business and enterprise. There is no maximum and there is no minimum. Minimum is one. Well, there is a minimum of one actually, but there we go. Excuse me. But there is no maximum. It's sold via NUL, which is a named user license, or a transaction model. And transactions are often also called consumables. So to complicate things today, I'll use both, but I'll probably mention both in the same breath. So named user licenses, as it says on the tin, we're licensing a person. Versus a transaction where we're just buying a pot of transactions. And a transaction is when you send a contract, for example, for signature. That would count as one transaction. A named user gets 150 transactions each, which I'll on in a moment. Licensing model wise, we have two. You can buy it under a VIP agreement or you can buy it under an ETLA. I'd actually probably encourage most customers to look at VIP at this stage, simply because VIP is a lot more flexible. And what we're finding is it's a bit of a chicken and the egg scenario where for us to license this, we fundamentally need to know how many people or how many transactions, and they're really hard questions to answer because not many have, are aware of how many are involved in our current processes, or there's lots of unknowns, so on and so forth. So a VIP tends to give you a bit more flexibility, one in terms of commitment, so maximum commitment is a year. ETLA will be to the end of your term, and likewise you can chop and change at the end of a VIP agreement, whilst with an ETLA, whatever you commit to, if you still have terms left or years left, you are committed to the same amount for the following years. Pricing is, I think it's fairly indicative price. I just converted the dollar prices on there, but it really varies. So it significantly varies, to be honest, depending on business or enterprise, depending on named user or transactions. And both named users and transactions have tiered pricing. So there's 4 levels of pricing for named users, 4 levels of prices for transactions. This is a really, really important point. I think it's really applicable, certainly if anybody here is maybe somebody who might be buying software on behalf of other departments. The named user licenses pool, and it's not something you may naturally expect. So if you was to license one individual or 2 individuals, both buy named user licenses, and it's not a case of them each getting 150 transactions, stroke consumables. There's a pot of 300 in the middle, and it's a first come, first serve basis. So we need to be really careful with named user licenses if we're trying to use a single agreement for lots of different stakeholders that maybe don't share budgets or don't share and collaborate on work. What I'd recommend, if named user is what you need, then you're probably better off creating a new agreement per named user model. Or more likely, you're better off going down a transaction model, and you're probably worth doing some sort of fair user policy. Again, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on this because the onboarding support would really help. But you want to make sure with customers to say, look, even if I buy transactions, they are shared amongst the team. So you've only bought 100. If you go over those, which you can see very easily in a portal, you'll need to pay for the difference so that you don't get issues with departments moaning about others stealing their licenses. So we need to be careful on that. But again, we can really help make sure we're licensing establishments correctly. So let us know if there's anything specific you need help with. So we're just going to move on, and we're going to do a little bit more of a comparison between named and transactions, straight consumables. So this is very specific, looking at VIP licensing. And like I said, it's probably how I'd expect the majority to be procured. Both code term. So a VIP agreement is a 12-month agreement as standard, and irrespective of when you buy either a named user or a transaction strict consumable license over that 12-month period, the expiry date is exactly the same. So everything will end the same day. You still get the same 30 days grace, etc. And at the end of that grace, actually, your licenses will cease to work. So as they do with standard Creative Cloud now, but that means your transactions will disappear at the end of your renewal period if you haven't used them as well. The next one is probably quite an applicable one, actually. There's a few things that almost threw me. They weren't quite in line with how I would have expected it to work, although it does kind of make sense. Proration, and one of the huge benefits of VIP is the ability to prorate. So again, they're a 12-month contract, but you pay for them monthly. So if there's 12 months left, you pay for 12 months with named users. You pay for 10 months if there's 10 months left, so on and so forth. However, with consumables or transactions, it's whatever it is that the price doesn't change. So if I'm buying 1,000 transactions, it doesn't matter if there's 12 months, 10 months, 1 month left, I'm paying exactly the same price. Volume discounts is also a bit different and worth being aware of how this works. So named users, it says VIP select, which is just literally standard VIP. So volume discounts, there's tiers 1 to 4, 0 to 9 users, 10 to 49, 50 to 99, 100 plus. So you've got those 4 levels still with named users. The transaction ones, I've actually put the tiering down here. So generally, pretty much everyone for named users should be able to access level 4. Work with us on that. Even if you're not buying 100 plus, we can help get your agreements up to level 4. For transactions, though, it's all based on how many you're buying at that given time. So to give you an example, if you bought 2,000 transactions at any stage, you will be looking at tier 2 pricing. You're in the 1,000 to 2,500 bracket. And then I look to buy another 600 licenses. So my total amount of transactions would be 2,600. But because that second transaction that I'm making is only for 600, it actually goes back to tier 1. So you're not benefiting, if the licenses aren't accumulating, you're not able to benefit from economies of scale in this manner. So what I would recommend if you are going down the transaction model is probably, if you're getting close to a threshold, it's worth getting the numbers or quotes, and we will do this as standards. If you're looking for 900, it might be worth looking at 1,000 because that discount and the unit cost may help. But likewise, if you've got lots of different people asking, you're better off collating orders and placing one larger order than lots of smaller ones where you may not be benefiting from a higher tiered discount. And then the last point on these is license management. So VIP named users, named user sign, pretty much the same as it is with everything else. With transactions, stroke consumables, you are flagged. So when you get down to when you've used and consumed 80% of your transactions, 90% of your transactions, and at 100%, you'll receive an email. And this will be to the administrator of the portal, and the reseller will receive that as well, just to say you're running low. Action potentially required. Let's have a quick look at implementation support, because I think this is really, really important. This is a great way of supporting you. And like I said, certainly when we're speaking to IT procurement, IT buyers, you don't want to be burdened with having to manage, deployment of licenses, or like I said earlier, of who someone's nicked my licenses here or my transactions. So it's important we help from upfront, and Adobe actually do quite a bit to help. And this could potentially impact the quantity of licenses you procure as well. So there's simply 2 models. There is a low touch model. If you buy 10 named user licenses or less, or 1,500 or less transactions, you simply receive an email, and it's a good luck on your way. It's a really good email. It's got training, support, onboarding, support, but it is very much down to you guys to get it up and running. For higher touch, so if you're buying literally just 11 named users or more, or 1,501 transactions or more, you are assigned a CSAM, which is a customer success account manager. They state a white glove service, which I love, but this is really good. And actually this program, it rolls out over about a 4-week process. It's absolutely down to you if you want to take this, I should mention. And the point of this is Adobe have acknowledged that buyers don't want to be burdened with the management of this. There may be sub-managers within departments sort of managing groups potentially, and there are going to be end users that are using this on a daily basis, creating contracts, etc. So this part of this onboarding process, you get lots of, I think there's like 4 or 5 touch points, some with the administrator, so you understand your roles, what you need to do, what to look out for, the sort of sub-administrators, if you like, so say key people in departments that may be managing licenses, and then for end users as as well, which is great. So everybody's going to get some sort of onboarding training. It should really help the management of that and making it light touch throughout the life cycle. And the thing that I love best here, and I know a couple of people on the call will appreciate this, is with Adobe support, is they get varying feedback. But what's great here is you get a survey at the end, and if you score your CSAM anything less than an 8, they are obliged to get back in touch with the university until you rescore them an 8 or more. So I don't know what you may do with this power, but you can, you certainly can ensure that you're getting good support to set you up. And if you're not satisfied, they will have to get back in touch with you. So for me, I find that really reassuring. It certainly gives me comfort that there'll be some help to support customers as they go through. A really common thing at the moment is people are saying, I'm looking for a digital signature, or I've been asked to license DocuSign, or I've been asked for Adobe Sign. And there's so many scenarios where we're quoting for both. I thought it'd be useful to try and put together a bit of a comparison. It's quite headline, so again, it is what it is, but these are sort of the points we've pulled out and some nuances we've noticed. So taking a step back, when we look at both companies, I think it's important that we understand a bit of their history. DocuSign have been going since 2003. As the name suggests, they're very focused in this world of digital signatures. They do have some slight other focuses or other areas they do working in as well, but very mature product. They do really good stuff around integrations. But similarly, Adobe have been going for years. Their history around forms and PDF is really beneficial for them here. But they purchased EchoSign back in 2011 now, so it's nearly 10 years since they've owned their own digital signature solution themselves, and they've had a lot of time to integrate that with Acrobat and other solutions. So both vendors have a really good foundation to hit go here, and I think we will see other vendors in the space as well. But where there's been a real drive amid COVID with staff working from home, without printers, without scanners, these are the two that I think are really going to dominate the sector for the foreseeable. So let's look at some comparisons. Licensing wise, they're both very similar. So you have, there we go. You have user licensing for both, which I touched on. Named user licensing, it may be called. The only differentiator with their named user licensing is Adobe give you 150 transactions stroke consumables each, whereas DocuSign give you 100 transactions stroke consumables. Stroke envelopes, actually, because DocuSign call a transaction or a consumable an envelope. So the terminology does get unnecessarily complicated, but if we stick to consumables, it may help. And then we look at the consumable licensing model. Both are very similar. They're available on tiered pricing models. The tierings are very similar. And actually, even the versions are very similar. I talked about Adobe's Business and Enterprise. It's really, really comparable to DocuSign's Business Pro and Advanced. It's almost as though one's copied the other, but I won't suggest any more than that. License term-wise, they are annual or multi-year, both exactly the same. Price availability, this is one that probably impacts us, and it may impact you guys, but it's quite frustrating at times getting pricing. So Adobe's really good in terms of we have we have a price list where I can just quote you immediately, apart from ETLAs, which is from Adobe. And similarly with DocuSign, they assign an account manager on nearly every requirement, which is great. They're really nice people. They know their stuff, but you can imagine how busy they are at the moment. So what I'm finding is trying to get a quote out of DocuSign is probably a bit more painful than it probably should be at times. Price, they are really comparable. We've done quite a few comparison quotes for people. Sometimes one's coming out cheaper than the other, but there is literally, a couple of % difference in them at times. So price probably isn't going to be what drives your decision here. Onboarding potentially could be, and I've just briefly touched on Adobe's onboarding support. I think it's quite good in that it's hands-on when you're buying 11 users or more, or 1,500 and 1+ transactions. Otherwise, it's self-serve and it's all down to you. With DocuSign, it is all free documentation. There's free online videos, but for professional services, for a human to support you, that would be a chargeable service. But then integrations wise, again, these are really, really similar. And when you start looking at even the versions and the integrations that are available, they're very similar. The only reason I think DocuSign have probably picked it is probably Google. They seem to have slightly better Google integration. But when you think Microsoft's chosen digital signature solution is Adobe, and it sits natively on the ribbons, then again, you can probably argue it either way. But I'd probably give that to DocuSign. So hopefully that's a helpful comparison. So we'll just have a quick look or a quick summary. Oh, sorry, it seems to have frozen on me. There we go. A quick summary, and then we'll jump into questions as well. So fundamentally, a digital signature is, and this is irrespective of solution, to be quite frank, it's going to be more efficient. It is going to save you time. It is going to save you money. It is going to make you more sustainable. It's going to reduce your impact on the environment, on paper and associated waste. It allows you to be auditable. So really good from a regulatory perspective. And a great thing, and certainly a topic that's always applicable in education, is user experience. It delivers a better end user experience. And it's a tool that should give you a return on your investment. Certainly for heavy users, this is a tool that should really save those guys some money. So that's pretty much it from me at this stage. I will just have a quick look at the chat to see if there's any questions. So typical. So let's just go through these one by one. So I can see Ian said, who needs a seat? So a user seat would be really ideal. I would say if you've got a group of people, so if there's a team of people in finance or in any particular professional service, they may need a user license, if that's what you mean, Ian. I'm not sure if that answers your question. But they would be the ones that would be licensed based on seats or users versus the transaction stroke consumable model. But again, it can depend on the use case, and it certainly depends on how they're being licensed and what agreement they sit on as well. So typical overall annual cost for a typical uni from Steve. It's actually a really hard question to answer, Steve, because at the moment we've had real huge variances on the quantities we're supplying and also the use cases. So we have a few unis where we have supplied them digital solutions for research groups who have required advanced integrations, which has had a big impact on pricing. I mean, I think the point here is, it's a cop-out potentially, but it's probably a bit early where we've seen a huge rise in this in the last few weeks to give you a real trend on what the costs are for an institution. It very much depends on which departments are taking up, how big the departments are as well. And when we look at staff numbers, there can be huge variances. What I will do, Steve, though, I think we can touch base with you on, I know we spoke about a few already, and we can look at some common case studies. And I think over the next few months, we'll start to see better trends in regards to what common prices are. So let me know if that answers your question there at all. So could you elaborate, a question from Emma, could you elaborate on the approve function? Sometimes I need to pre-populate a document with the signer's signature and send the document for approval. So when I say approval, it's not necessarily approve a document to say, great, we're ready to make this a contract, if that's what you mean. It's more a case of me, I'll use a purchasing example. So if there are often purchasing thresholds, 25 grand is often the threshold to go out to tender, for example. And if there is an order being raised by the university at 25 grand, it might require approval from a director level. So a procurement person could sign it, but they need to get that document approved as well by a senior signatory or approver, in this case, who literally receives a document and they approve it there and then it is good for procurement to send the purchase order over to the supplier. So it's more a case of literally approving a document where a signature may not be required versus building a draft document and getting somebody to approve that. If that's the question, Emma, let me know. I'm just going to scroll down as well to see if there's any I've missed.
Just to jump in there, Dave. So I think you've actually answered all of the questions there. We still have some people online that if you've got any more questions, feel free to drop them in now. But Just want to take the opportunity to thank Dave for the webinar, and for all the content. Always interesting listening to Dave talk about Adobe. But also, just to point out, as Ryan did on the chat, that we are recording all of the webinars through the VTC. So you'll be able to watch this back. We encourage you to share that with any of your colleagues that you think this will be applicable to. If there's any specific questions or specific queries that you have, we're very, very fortunate to have Dave in our team. So Dave is more than happy to deal with your individual requests if needed. So I think there's one more question that's come in from Ian Morrison there, so I'll put myself back on mute for you, Dave.
No problem. Just before I touch on Ian's one, just in response to Kerry. So what we will do, Kerry, I'll send you the slides, but better than that, there's this, there are two, I think they're really good guides. So there's a HE Adobe Sign PDF that, and again, being quite frank, it's applicable for digital signatures, full stop. It really talks about the use cases and a lot more depth. So I'll send that through because that's where I've stolen some of this information from, in fairness, today. But then likewise, if you want me to go through this on a separate session or send anything else through, feel free to reach out. And then in regards to Ian's question, so again, it kind of depends, but it's probably a yes, Ian. So if you're sending it out, if someone creates a form that needs to be sent to 500 people, does that count as 500 transactions? So if it's a single form that 500 people are interacting with, then no, it would be one. But if it's a form where I'd imagine 500 would have their own unique version that may require completion or a signature, that would count as 500. And just to explain again, feature-wise, Adobe have something called Mega Sign that's built in as standards. So it's in the business edition, you don't have to get enterprise. And Mega Sign entitles you to send these things in bulk. So you can send the document to 500 people, which might have slight nuances. So it might be different names and details within them. It only sends 300 as standard, but you can contact support to make that larger. So you could in one go send 500 out, but that would count as 500 transactions. Unless it's one single form that they're all interacting with, which is probably unlikely, because it'd be a pretty big form, I'd imagine, on that basis. So excellent, no problem, Kerry. We'll get those over to you. I'll have those other things, and Deck, you mentioned no problem. What we'll send the I'll send the I think the PDF I've got is probably more useful because it gives you some real key info. I've got no issue sharing with you with Deck as well. So if you need those, and what I'll do it personally. So after this, I'll send over. I'll just pull off the attendees list. I'll send everybody over the applicable attached PDFs. If you want any more information, let me know. I've been I think I sat for about 8 hours of the Sign presentation recently, so it's still fresh in my mind. Utilize it while it's still there. And yeah, if there are no other questions, then we will leave it there for now. But like I said, I'll follow up with you all. If you have any queries, like I said, we'll follow up with my details. But likewise, I'll copy in your applicable account manager accordingly. So let's just see. They've got another question from Emma. Is there another function I can use to have someone approve the use of the signature? How does Adobe handle documents signed on others' behalf? That's a really good point, actually. So let me just get this together. Is there another function that I can use to have someone to approve the use of their signature? So if you're signing on behalf of somebody, if that's the question, you can have multiple signatures in there. Or if it's a question of saying you have approval to use a director's signature, I don't see why that would be an issue. So fundamentally, again, when you think about this legally, digital signatures are legally binding and they're auditable. So fundamentally, the audit trail would show that you had signed it, Emma, and fundamentally, it would then, internally, you would just have evidence that you have the approval to use that person's signature. It's very commonplace. I know the directors of work, and you get the PRs, the PAs even, often use have the ability to use their signature. So that would be applicable. And how does Adobe Sign handle documents being signed on others' behalf? So yeah, it's the same question, I suppose. So whilst you can sign it and you could sign it with another person's name or details, it's really probably more around having that internal approval. So again, if I was going to send the contract to Emma, and you wanted somebody else to sign that document, first and foremost, if I'm using Adobe Sign, I would have stipulated that it's Emma. It needs to be Emma. I need these names, this signature, and it will be emailed to you. So you probably just need to communicate with the person that's signing to make sure they're aware of that as well. But again, it's probably more down to internal process and making sure you've got that internal approval looped in, and that way it can really streamline. But what I'm going to do, Emma, just because I think there might be a little bit more to that, and I think it's probably a bit of a common use case, I'm going to jot that down myself, and I'll just see if there's anything else Adobe do to help people with approvals or when you're signing on behalf of other people. Okay, let me know if there's anything else as well, any other questions. If I can't answer them now, I will get the answers and I'll come back to you accordingly. I'll just give another game. No problem, Emma. I'll drop you an email, like I said, with a follow-up on that in case there is more to it. But I think my answer so far is probably right. Yes, we won't tell everybody else if it's wrong. No, we will. So if there's no other questions, we'll probably leave it there for today. But like I said, I'll email everybody so you have my details. Being quite honest, if you need anything with Adobe or anything else around digital signatures, it is a real hot topic at the moment. So we've learned lots, and we can certainly try and support you as best as we can.
Thanks, Dave. I think that's a wrap.
Yeah, I was going to play the thank you video.
No, that was brilliant, and thanks for answering all those questions. If there is any other questions, feel free to reach out. I'm sure, like many other people, the trees in my garden are clapping for you, Dave. You're saving a lot of trees with this messaging as well.
Half a tree a year I'm saving at the moment based on my work that I've worked out, did the maths. Thank you all very much. Take care, everybody.